Okay, so that should now hopefully mean that we are live. So talk amongst yourselves quietly for a few minutes, boys and girls, while I get my act together here. I want to introduce Christopher Black, DC, Dr. Christopher Black, who has a very interesting story to tell us about discovering the carnivore diet, being on the carnivore diet, the results of the carnivore diet, etc. And then after that, we can do questions and answers if that's something that you all want to do. Let me just tick that one there. And now I'll start that again because the stream was private, so nobody saw me introduce Dr. Christopher Black, chiropractor, who has a very interesting story in terms of his introduction to the carnivore diet. This is one of the series of interviews, carnivore stories, if you like. But we're going to do this live because we've tried to record it several times and we've had technical issues and failures and stuff. We even tried to do this live stream the other day and that failed too, which precipitated us changing the way we're doing things a bit. So hopefully people will drift in, they'll see that the stream is occurring and they'll drift in. While that's happening, I will pass the floor to Dr. Christopher Black, who can tell us all about it, carnivore and stuff.
Hi, Bart. Thanks for having me again. This is good to be with you. And like I've said before, but I'm getting good at it, is I've been a chiropractor for about 25 years, and I practice traditional chiropractic. I only do chiropractic. It's the only thing I've wanted to do since I was about 16. And the bulk of my practice comes from patients who've come from a failed healthcare system. I don't see an awful lot of low back and neck pain and headache things that we traditionally see in chiropractic, but I see people who are looking for something different because the system that they've been born into, if you will, has failed them. And how does that parlay into the carnivore lifestyle? Well, I think I was introduced to it way back, or at least some of the principles of it were back in the early 90s. But even thinking differently in a chiropractic school, I couldn't get my head around what this professor was teaching us. He was kind of a wackadoo, and he was an adult onset diabetic, totally ill health, but he was an academic, and he all of a sudden proclaimed he was going to get himself off of all of his diabetic medications by this thing called the Atkins diet, only eating eggs and bacon and meat. And I thought that was crazy, particularly coming from the early 90s, the weightlifting, carbo loading, performance sport nutrition that they taught in college. That was crazy going into that diet. A few years later, South Beach diet came around. I saw some patients getting good results with that because it did minimize some of the bad things. At least people were maybe eating a cleaner, healthier diet, and so they were expressing benefits. And then probably about six or 7 years ago, I had a patient come in, and her daughter had horrible seizure disorder, and it came on later, and about 2 years old, and these seizures were ruining her life, and she wanted to add chiropractic to that mix of modalities to see if we could help her out with that. But she had put her on a ketogenic diet, and I was like, what could that possibly be? And looking it up, I was like, oh, okay. I get to understand now what that professor in the early 90s was trying to tell us following the Atkins. So the evolution of the science, or the ability to get these concepts, made an awful lot of sense to me. So I in myself said, well, kind of like the Ken Berry story, I was living, serving others and not really necessarily taking care of myself. And I was about 45 and I have 3 young children. I said, well, let me try this. I didn't like the way I was feeling eating the diet, or that afternoon lull and just being a little lethargic. And I really followed the ketogenic model at first, and it worked well. But then I found that it was just not right. I was chasing numbers, chasing macros, testing this, tasting that, testing all these things. And I like that aspect of being able to control what I ate as well as how it made me feel. But I just never really had the affinity to the greens and the salads, and really wasn't fully satisfied. And then I started to come across, Sean Baker, as we all do. We all kind of came across these things here. And it was pretty impressive on how it's changed my life. I think one picture I'd sent you, I was probably up to around 260 at one point, and I've been hovering around 200, feeling great, never felt better. And, we're human, and I know I am, and I'm completely addicted to carbohydrates. And whoever says that that is not a real thing is a liar. It is as strong as any addiction. And I know if we have a tough weekend and we're going out and we, fall off the wagon in a sense, not only do you feel like crap, but my reoccurring tendonitis in the elbows, shoulders, lower back from, serving chiropractic patients for 25 years rears its ugly head. And if I'm on it point blank, I have no pain. I wake up with no pain and I feel energized and great. So, you know, you have to make conscious notice of how your body feels when you're not on point there. We've been incorporating it into the office, and like we have spoken before, although chiropractic is in its principles and philosophies different than allopathic medicine, the educational system is deplorable as well as stuck in a traditional medical paradigm because we have to sit for national boards, state boards that are very often in that realm of traditional medicine. So they're teaching us or wanting us to go out and be different, but yet holding us to that same script. Patient comes in with XYZ, well, refer them out. Well, they're here for something different. Why am I going to let them go? So I didn't have a great understanding of nutrition, and a lot of this stuff is certainly self-study. And I don't sit to preach to my patients about things. I tell them what works for me and what I can see that it would work for them. And if they're open to it, it actually is a great adjunct to the chiropractic portion, because I feel, and like we have spoken before, we are sicker as a species as we were than 2 decades ago. And talking to some of the old timers in my profession who've been in practice 50 years or even had grandfathers who practiced in the 1905 or whatever, they feel that we don't get the same results that they did back then. And I feel that we are just sicker. I think we're born into sickness now. Everything from childbirth all the way through the process of development is laden with medical intervention rather than just letting the miracle that has brought us to this point allow to express itself. So when we do an intervention, whether it be a chiropractic adjustment or even in the pharmaceutical realm, that person is different than they were 10 years ago. So we're not a healthier clay. So when I provide a modality or a removal from obstruction to healing, we're not getting that healing if that person's going home and eating that standard American diet, eating McDonald's, not taking care of themselves. So I had to find an answer because I was getting people stagnant, and I've been with being in practice 25 years. Some of my patients I've seen kind of grow up into adult diabetics, and they're frustrated. And I said, well, try this. And it's a hard concept at first for them to kind of grasp around because it's different, but they asked me to give them a different answer. And if they do what we say, guess what? It works. We talked about one of the frustrating things that I have as a practitioner. If I want to co-manage this case, I would never tell a patient, get off all your medications, get off stuff. But I need to work with them with a physician that is actually open-minded enough to realize that, hey, these people are getting healthier, so they should probably be taking less chemicals. But a lot of them don't even get their mind around it. I've had patients who've taken their A1C from the 8s down into the 5s, and the doctors, are panicked to death that all they're eating is meat. I'm like, well, I think that they're probably ultimately more healthy, but the medical doctors are basically script readers, in a sense, actors. You study a script. If a patient comes with A, B, and C, you look through your manual and you prescribe, or you go X, Y, Z. And I believe that if these doctors do step outside of the box, in a sense, that they're penalized. They're not going to have the criteria, and we see that here in our state. It's very difficult for a free-minded parent to choose a pediatrician that doesn't conform to the standard allopathic care. If they're not on 100% of all schedules, whether it be vaccinations or whatever the recommendations are, they won't even accept them as a patient because the pediatricians are incentivized by the insurance companies. If they have X number of populations fit into this box, they get a financial bonus. So it's not even a lack of their understanding. They're incentivized to not allow patients to think for themselves. And that's my main goal, is that they may not like my procedures. I want them to walk out of my office questioning everything they've done to that point, knowing that it might not be the best answer because you're not healthy. And doing more of what got you unhealthy isn't going to make you more healthy. So I've been adding that as well as recommendations and trying to find co-practitioners to kind of deal with, or at least have an open-mindedness to patients. But I had another young lady, she followed the regimen. She was down 60 pounds, her energy's up, and the doctor freaked out because her, cholesterol went up to like 240. Totally lost her mind, telling her she was going to immediately die, and she had to stop this at all points, with no mention of the overall fact of, A, we should be excited about this individual who's taking on the challenge to improve their health naturally, and B, they've made some great progress. So it's very frustrating. And the one thing that I've been so appreciative of what you do, as well as the whole entire carnivore community, is we're talking about things that work. There's a passion and there's an energy of, hey, there's something different I can try. And the people that I've listened to on your channel and the other channels, they're actually excited about being in control of their life, because for years when you grow up in America, you have to listen to the doctor. What they say goes. And we can see what that has done to us, particularly over the last few years, listening to that pseudoscience, that dogmatic practitioner to say, this is absolutely what we need. Well, I hate to tell you, those headaches that you get, your normal headaches, aren't because you have a lack of Tylenol in your body. There's a problem with you, but we're conditioned to believe that it comes from a pill or a potion or lotion. And as we know, none of those things do anything towards healing. They either inhibit or stimulate, and they may remove an obstruction to healing, but only the body's healing itself. And it's a quite fascinating thing when we're feeding our children chicken nuggets and Twinkies, and guess what? They're still growing new eyeball cells, and they're still growing. Definitely I don't feel that they have the right vitality and healing opportunity that they would if they're normal. But can you think of the miracle that we have now? If we only fuel it the right way, we're going to have, and I tell my patients, I said, you can make cement and not have the perfect ideal ratios. You'll still have cement, but it's probably not going to be as strong as if you use what the maker or the creator or the designer intended to use in the recipe. And the same thing with the body is, I can only do so much, but if your foundation isn't there, and it's not only diet, how we eat, how we sleep, what we feed into our minds. So there's an awful lot to it. And we do have some resistance against us, though. That is for sure.
Yep.
For sure.
Absolutely. All right. I'm just thinking
I was
just thinking while you were talking there, Christopher, that I'm just trying to think of a single pharmaceutical agent that is used by the allopathic medicinal community that cures anything.
Probably not, because if you had that, would you give it to a person who wasn't symptomatic? Why? Because it would make them
better.
Sick. Well, obviously not, but I mean, it either inhibits or stimulates. And you know what? Again, if God forbid one of my children had a condition, if they were type 1 diabetic, I'm grateful for the ability to manage that with science. And that's where allopathic and traditional medicine should be, but it has zero to do with health. And as a matter of fact, I contend that, I don't know if they know it or not, but they're destroying a generation of people, but yet are creating secondary industries to manage that. For example, I mean, gosh, one thing is you put a 14-year-old girl on a chemical body altering hormone. They don't check the dosages, the monitoring, all that until they're 35 and they get off it. And guess what? They can't have a child. That's okay. We have an industry for that. Or you feed somebody crap, or you give them a statin drug at age 40 now, and guess what? They can't perform in bed, but that's okay. We have a purple pill for them. So we're overriding these natural mechanisms of, hey, you know what? Maybe if you did do the thing the purple pill needed, you'd die because your innate intelligence is telling you, hold on, you're not healthy enough for that. That's all right. We'll override that. It's maddening. It's maddening because the crazy ones are the ones who are just taking a pause and say, I get it. I'm actually going to think about this. I'm going to do my own research, and they lose their mind. You can't do that. I'm the doctor. Whoa, wait a minute. It's my health. I need to make that choice because I need to live with it. Oh, you don't follow the script. Get out. Oh, thanks, doc. Thanks for first do no harm.
Yeah.
Thanks for being my coach, right? So, and again, I don't really even put the onus on these new doctors coming through because, I mean, I think they generally want to help people. But the machine of the allopathic model is not good. And if you look at the history of it, chiropractic. I've had dinner with chiropractors in my lifetime that were arrested for practicing chiropractic. It was illegal in, I think, the last state here in the United States, like the early 70s. It was still illegal to help people through chiropractic because the machine didn't want you to get better without their intervention. I think back, probably in 1910, you were probably lucky to go to a quack chiropractor who would try to help you naturally, because, you could get bloodletted, you could probably get some leeches on you, you could get, hard metals. Look at all the things that they said were a great idea. And now they realize, well, that was pretty not great, So that machine has been really against any free thinking for a long, long time. I mean, better than anybody.
Thinking? No, you're not allowed to be doing that. Goodness, no. Thinking
Absolutely
for yourself.
not. And but it's interesting to see that with the exposure of other things, and unfortunately, people are now using the keto or the low carb movement to, of course, make a secondary business. But it's actually getting people to at least be aware of that. It can be channeled. And I've had 2 patient encounters over the last 2 or 3 weeks where they talk about, they're here because they've failed, but yet, I've been trying. Have you ever heard of an anti-inflammatory diet? I'm like, ooh, tell me what you think. She goes, well, I've tried eating just meat for a week. I'm like, oh, how naughty, but tell me about it. She's like, I feel good. Like, wow, you're at the right place, sister. Let's talk about it, So it's almost like a dirty little secret, because I think if you, particularly in some cultural homes, you say, I'm not going to eat the breads, the pastas, and are you out of your mind? You're going to die, because it's so ingrained in us. The forward thinkers, the people who got the iPhones on that day one, are starting to think differently because they realize, you know what, boy, my parents are living a shitty life. I'm putting grandma, she doesn't even remember who I am. And they're wondering, well, I don't think we were designed to lose our marbles and forget who our children were at age 70. So I think as we see our elders become more sick, I hope that the younger people, I mean, we're both 50 now this year, and I contend I'm better health now than I was in my mid 40s, but I hope that we're going to break that cycle and we can teach by example so our children can at least get some of the principles go out. Because if they stayed on that trajectory, I don't know what's going to happen for this country. It'll be bankrupt, first of all, in healthcare expenditures, but with just prescribed out zombies. Crazy.
Yep, exactly. So speaking of the differences between 45 and 50 in terms of your health, Christopher, obviously you're suggesting that you kind of took something like a carnivore approach starting about 5 years ago?
I did. I at one point, because chiropractors, can often be extreme in their own belief systems. So through my early days, it was all about, just the chiropractic adjustment. I don't need to care about what I eat because, they're not. And, obviously that became not really true. And then I did it because I'd gotten connected with some other thought thinkers. And I said, oh, I got to go vegetarian for a while. Didn't really like that. But this was in my, early 30s. I was like, yeah, this isn't great. As a matter of fact, I gained quite a bit of weight after that, I think. And that's one of my peaks up at 260. Then, like I say, South Beach came around and we said, oh, let's kind of clean out the crap. Let's get out of the seed oils. And we had some good early mentors there, but we didn't have the access to the YouTube. And, I didn't want to go break out the books of the library, and those were difficult to find. And then again, stress, life, serving others, you kind of fall back to that standard way of fare. And then right around 45, I was like, oh my God. I saw that one picture of myself and I'm like, oh my God. How could I? And it's that revelation moment, like, people coming in to talk to me and I'm, tired at the end of the day and I'm telling them how to live a better life. I'm like, oh my God, this is stupid. So I said, let me try that. And I tried the ketogenic diet and, it really fit into what my beliefs were because it was contrary to mainstream. So that was right up there. If I could get somebody's irie up because I was doing something different, then bonus points. But then I was like, wow, this really feels good. And then I noticed on those days that I wasn't in compliance, how bad I felt. And I made a real conscious effort to note that, hey, it might've been fun sitting around doing XYZ, but man, I needed to be on that sofa about an hour later, and I was in a coma and I was useless. Like, well, this isn't the way to live. And that's what I tell my patients. I say, yeah, we're all human. You know, if you're gonna have a birthday cake for your daughter, you're gonna have a bad day. Just mentally imprint how you feel after that. Like, make that conscious connection, because guess what? You're not gonna like it, and then that might give you a better motivator to make a better decision next time. So then I did the keto. I noticed when I went keto, my body weight, I got down into the 190s, and I hadn't been under 190 probably since high school, 30 years ago. But I just, it didn't work. And so once I went more all meat based, my body weight actually had gone up, and I didn't really change much. And I think my bone structure, my body structure definition has changed differently by going on the more all meat diet. And the joint, like I said, the joint pain is gone, stiffness is gone, energy levels are great. Fall right to sleep up at 4:30 with no alarm, but most times, and you just keep going.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
And I've one other thing, I've contended that we don't need to spend millions of dollars on vitamins and all that stuff, and I've never felt the need where I was deficient in any of that. And if you look at most practitioners' offices who are alternative, they're selling you every vitamin under the sun. And I'm like, well, that's no different than allopathy. The body doesn't know what it needs, particularly from a chemical source that way. So that's the freeing part of this, is I don't sell patients anything other than, the ability to think differently in my chiropractic, but yet I give them the resources in order to hopefully give me a better working foundation so that I can have a better clay, if you will, to work with.
Awesome. Good. So anyone that wants to see what happened in terms of Christopher's weight during that period, it's on the splash screen. It's on the thumbnail of this presentation if you want to go and have a look at it. You did lose quite a number of pounds, clearly. How did that tragic loss of weight fit in with your death from scurvy and bowel cancer from not being able to go to the toilet because you weren't eating any plants?
It is, and it's funny when you say that. When you lose that much weight, it just comes off. You see people you haven't seen in a while, and they look at you and they're like, "You okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm great. I've never been better." Because. Yeah, and then they look at you and they're like, wow, you do, your skin looks better. I mean, being mostly Irish and English, I'm certainly used to be prone to horrible sunburns, but I've never liked the idea of, pouring chemicals all over my body. So I've been resistant to that. But the last 2 or 3 years, go out in the sun all day long, sensibly, of course, obviously, but have not experienced the sunburn. The skin looks great. You don't get that. And I've taught my children to look out for people, and you can almost pick out those that have had the medical weight loss surgeries, because although they look skinny, they look unwell. Their body has no absorption of nutrients. Their skin looks poor. So yes, I don't think I'm dying from scurvy. If anything, my skin looks better than it has in a long time.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, I've had known, the only thing I wish I did, and I haven't been to a medical doctor since I was 16, so I have no basis for this. I almost wish I had an entire blood panel right at the beginning of this at like 45, because it would have been interesting just from an analytical standpoint to see what my body chemistry has done. But I know that, just routinely checking my, fasting blood sugars, I mean, certainly it's not uncommon, around midday to be around the 70. Energy's feeling great. My desire to eat multiple meals has decreased. You could almost get away with one good solid midday meal. I do watch what I do eat, because you have a tendency, if you do eat too much, you have that little bump in that afternoon. And to keep it social with the family, I try to have also a meal with everybody at night. But it's certainly, it's been easy to integrate even in social situations, because people don't really pay attention, and you can kind of curtail it to what you need. So yeah, no scurvy. Sorry.
Excellent. All right. Well. While I'm thinking about it, I'd also like to remind my fine viewers that the single most prevalent cause of metabolic dysfunction is failure to hit the like button under my videos. So I think you need to take care of that. Make sure you do hit the like button. Make sure you share the link to this video out on your social media feeds, and also make sure that you comment not only here in the live stream version, but also later on when it becomes a pre-recorded video. Do please also comment under the video as well. Al Gore really does love his rhythms, and failure to comply will lead to a late night visit from Yellow Ted, and he will bring his furry truncheon with him, so make sure you take care of that. All right, so no scurvy, a loss of weight, tragic situation that occurred there. It's amazing, isn't it, that people go to you like, oh, are you okay? Because their first thought when you've lost weight is, oh, you must be unwell. No. The other thing I wanted to check with you is, how have you coped, Christopher, with the fact that since you're not eating any of that vital fibre for about 5 years, clearly you haven't moved your bowels in 5 years, so how's that going?
Well, pretty impactful. No, it's
Boom, boom. I love it.
It's just a thing. Like, I don't, some days you just don't go because you're probably, and then some days you go, and it's not, oh my God, I didn't go. Well, that means, boy, I probably ate the appropriate ratio for what I needed for my body to absorb that day. And there's no pain, no congestion. And one of the reports of some of my patients is like, I don't fart anymore. Their wives are very pleased with that, but it's just, it doesn't have that fermenting decay in their body. And I laugh when somebody says, well, if you eat meat, it's going to stay in you. I said, no, eat those vegetables and let me know how you feel. So yeah, absolutely no complaints. When it's time to go, it goes. And when you don't think about it, and of course, if we listen to the stupid commercials and you got to take this fiber, that fiber, they want you to go 3-4 times a day. Well, and if that is your expectation, but your physiology is absorbing everything you consume, guess what? There's going to be nothing to be burned out at the end. Well, that seems to make sense to me, right? And that's a good litmus to see how my diet is. If I've done too much, I had too much fat and I wasn't adapted to that. That's a challenge, and and the body reminds you pretty quickly when you've been off and you go back on. It's amazing how your body just kind of readapts itself, gets rid of the garbage, and then you get right back on track. So, yeah, okay there too.
Awesome. All right, a question for you, Christopher, from Norman. Norman would like you to speak, if you could, to the physiological and psychological aspects of addiction to saccharides.
Well, from a physiological standpoint, I say, Bart, you probably know more about that than I do, but I just know that it's real.
Yeah.
And I know that, again, talking out of my ass, so it definitely is anecdotally from what I've understood. I mean, it triggers those centers in the brain that are for those addiction centers, similar to that of any of the illicit drugs. And it does, bump out that dopamine and that cortisol, and it's really a feel good thing. But boy, it really crashes you on the other end. So I don't know, and I will clearly tell you, I don't know the biochemistry of it, although I know as an addict, if you will, it's real. And it's, and Bart, please tell me, if you have pathways that you can share with us, but I just know that is something.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty tied up with the dopaminergic pathway. It seems pretty clear that that's what underpins at least the physiological side of it. In terms of the psychological side of it, that's not really my department either.
No, but, in what you're saying, though, is, but think about it. Johnny has a great day on the ball field. What do we celebrate with? An ice cream cone. Jane has a bad day at school. Well, let's go get a Happy Meal, right? So I think it's a sign of an endearment in some cultures. Oh, grandma made you some cookies, right? So I think it's even inborn in us that we relate those sensations to comfort, perhaps, or stress, or all of those things in which people would cope to. And I think that if you take that same individual and give them an illicit substance, they're going to have a pre-addiction processy to some people, than others. So I think from a psychological standpoint, it's environmental or how we were brought up. Then it connects into how susceptible we are to those dopamine receptors. Some people get addicted to running. Egads, not me, but it depends on what that trigger is. So I think that's the case. And I know that even with me, and I don't know, this is one thing I've been thinking about, and I don't know if you have any insight, is I've had patients who say, well, I take like a carbonated natural seltzer water, like a black cherry seltzer water, but it has a sweeter taste to it from a natural source. They don't disclose what that is. I think that still triggers the physiology to assume that there's something there, and it might throw you off from appropriate processes. I haven't seen any data on that. That's my hunch. Do you have any insight on that, Bart?
Yeah, it's funny you should say, because I was involved in the conduct of a study that was completed at the University of Auckland about 10 or 12 years ago or so, when I was working there. And what was done was that we had a bunch of athletes, cyclists, who would come into the lab, and we were tracking a bunch of physiological responses while they were undergoing cycle ergometry. And we had them get a solution of either sugar, water, or artificially sweetened beverage. They were identical. You couldn't visually tell them apart. They tasted the same, etc. And the athlete was to swish, 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 and spit, not swallow it. And over the next X number of minutes, we were tracking things like their power output on the bike, but also their insulin response and a few other things as well. And what we were able to show in that study was that as soon as the brain recognizes the taste of sweetness in the mouth, insulin was released.
No matter the source.
No matter the source, whether it was sugar or artificial sweetener that had no carbohydrate at all in it, that the mere taste of sweetness itself was setting off a cephalic response, and a message was going to the endocrine system, and insulin was being released in the expectation that because there was sweetness in the mouth, sugar is coming. Also, the power output on the cycle went up. Sugar's coming. No sugar was involved, because in either case they didn't swallow.
Wow.
So,
and that would definitely contend to some of the anecdotal information I've heard of these, consumption of diet soda increases, obesity, because you think you're doing the right thing. So you have that, but you eat crappy, but I'm having a diet soda. Well, that's still driving those processes going into something like you spend a lot of time on that Randall cycle, right? If you're already priming the insulin, but then you're shotgunning it with more crap because you think you're doing a better choice on a sugary sweet drink, then it makes you off. And one of the comments was just there, I just noticed it was like, since I've been on keto or carnivore, even the taste of Diet Coke is too sweet. And that's true. And I tell my patients, I said, just give it a couple weeks. You're going to feel like crap, just like if you stop drinking alcohol after a prolonged period of time. You're going to detox. I don't like calling it the keto flu. No, your body is detoxifying itself. And there's certain ways you can do it. And you have a very logical approach. Don't do it overnight. Kind of work your way through it. But your body's cleansing itself. And once it's cleansed, you're right. Some of those things that you used to crave or desire, you taste them and like, oh my God, that is out of control. Peanut butter. You think peanut butter is bland, but you take traditional peanut butter here in America filled with sugar. It's like, oh,
yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah.
But I think that's the body's natural way of saying, you don't need this. Don't keep consuming it. But if you take a child that's all they've been eating since day one, they don't know what natural is anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the majority of our entire culture here. Young women don't know what a natural cycle is because they're not allowed to have one, whether it be through diet or intervention. Men don't know what it's like to be natural because they're sitting at a phone all day. They're not out working. We're not grounding like you had brought up in other videos. We're not even touching the earth. God forbid you get your feet dirty.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've lost so much touch with what was provided for us, and we wonder why we're sick.
Yeah.
It's madness.
Incredible, isn't it? Incredible. Good comment here from Norman saying that he read somewhere else, can't remember where, it doesn't really matter, about how even the expectation of ingesting food can trigger that cephalic insulin response. You don't even have to put the sweet taste in your mouth. If you smell food cooking, your body will release insulin. Yes, correct, Norman. It's an incredible thing that your body is able to prepare itself for what it thinks is coming. The problem is we're now fooling our body by making artificial things available that are not natural. making your body think it's going to get some sugar when it's not, and that can lead to real problems. So there you have it. Artificial sweeteners are not better, by the way, than sugar. Both are equally, in my mind, contraindicated. And for me, it was like I still drink quite a bit of contraindicated toxin in the form of oxalate-rich coffee, which I have with heavy cream. I used to have it with artificial sweetener because I was so used to the taste of sweetness, and I thought, well, I'm not going to take sugar in anymore, but I've got to keep sweetening my coffee. And then several years ago, I went, you know what? Actually, that's got to go. And I just cold turkey got rid of it. And now I couldn't imagine drinking coffee with sweetener in it. That would be horrible, because now I'm used to the actual taste of coffee with cream. So, yep, it's all about what your body expects, really. Bruce Lee says, I find the taste of artificial sweetener addictive, even after being carnivore a long time. Okay, well, my lovely partner Pim does a lot of work in the addiction area in terms of sweetness and sugar and all that kind of nonsense. Perhaps you should have a word with her on her fine channel, which you can find if you search for Pim, P-I-M, Johnson, which is J-A-N-S-S-O-N. It's not Pam, it's not Johnson, it's Pim Johnson. Okay, she's very clear on that. And it's not Quim either. I called her Quim the other day by mistake because it was a slip of the tongue. No, she's not that either. It's Pim Johnson. Very good. Go and look her up.
I would have to say with that one, probably, like with anything else, if they're designing a sweetener, they're going to modify it to the point that it attracts the most neurological insult or influence in order to continue it to be craving. I mean, I don't think they would have designed it to pass over that dopamine, response as hard as they can. I mean, we're dealing with, if these guys were, synthesizing recreational drugs, it would be the purest of the pure, I am sure, the food industry, right? So they're not going to waste a molecule and not target to get you to come back. So that's probably why we are having such a challenge breaking that cycle and that addiction, because it's targeting those receptors very, very hard, a lot more than you would get in a normal natural berry. Those things probably tasted like crap back in the day, not like what we're buying at the grocery store.
Yes. Right, I just wanted to mention that I'm not sure if you guys are hearing it or not, but there is from time to time a bit of an echo which drifts in and out and comes and goes. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. I'm certainly getting it on this end. That's an artifact of the software, apparently, that I'm using for the first time right now to do a live stream, because I've dumped out the StreamYard and the Restream people out of my life because they weren't being helpful. So I'll feedback to these guys about that in the background. But if you are hearing that, apologies for that. I don't think it's that bad. I can still hear everything Christopher's saying, and so that's the main thing. Rick's in the house. Good to see you, Rick. Charger more pa, I should say. If you don't know Christopher, Rick went carnivore 39 years ago.
I heard his podcast just the other day, and like I said, that's the beauty of this community, right? I mean, he didn't even think that there were other people like him because it was just what he was doing. And then all of a sudden he's like, wow, I'm embraced now. I'm not different, but I mean, the guy looks amazing.
Incredible,
right?
Isn't it?
Earlier.
Yeah.
Good Lord. But yeah, having these stories being shared and they're relatable to different people. I'm not relatable to everybody. We certainly know you may not be relatable to everybody.
What?
I know it's a
What?
shocker. I hate to tell you that, but
what?
I want to break it to you easy.
What?
But I love it.
I'm here all week.
But that's the beauty of what we do, and by sharing your example and your clients that are sharing those stories, it's amazing. Like with Joey, hopefully he can target the younger audience. I'm in awe of that young man and how articulate he is in sharing the message. And you get that story from that mom who was strung out with 5 kids, and she's changed her life to improve the life of her family. This community is really trying to break its chains of sickness because one of the sicknesses I see in my office is the people, when you get them better and you start to remove their thing, they will self-sabotage themselves because you're removing a piece of their identity. And I think that's because they don't have the control, or they don't feel like they have the control to make the change. And the beauty of being able to dictate what you consume and actually realize that there's something that's happening positive from that, you can break away that need to have a diagnosed condition. And it's wonderful to hear these stories of other people, mental clarity, people getting off of multiple medications. I mean, being able to engage relationships with their family members because they're mentally well, really just by changing what you're consuming. Now, imagine if we parlayed that into our ability to critical think, how we take care of our lives in other ways, detach from certain things, and have the courage to do so. But I think this lays down that foundation for that by sharing these stories to go, oh my God, wait a minute, there's hope. Yeah, there's always hope. You might be a 70-year-old type 2 diabetic, but you're not going to be a non-diabetic, but you're going to be a healthier 70-year-old type 2 diabetic who can maybe remove 2 or 3 medications for his life and extend his life another 10 or 15 years in a better quality of that. So there's always somewhere where you can go and to share these stories, because we know, Bart, you know better than I do, we're not going to get multi-level funding to try to support our lifestyle here. We need those N+1s, those anecdotals, which to me are more important than these big studies that are bought and paid for, because we're fighting not only an individual choice, but we're fighting an entire industry, multiple industries that don't really want people to be well. And they don't even like us talking like this. This is heresy. We're asking people to be responsible for their own health, make choices that work for them. And honestly say, if you don't do it, okay, that's cool. We still love you, but you can be better. Maybe you should take a different approach. So yeah, I mean, 39 years carnivore, just kind of innately knew that was how his body worked. Fascinating. And yeah, I hate Brussels sprouts too, so I'm right there with him. I mean, it was fascinating. But imagine if we got enough young people, Joey's age, to actually say, I want to try that. There's a hope that we could maybe have a population of people that are healthier. That's going to be a good thing.
Got to be.
And I really feel for those practitioners who find out about this, and yet they don't have the freedom to think differently. I mean, I'm lucky as a chiropractor. I'm expected to kind of be a little oddball or think differently. But imagine like somebody like Dr. Baker, who realized 80% of the people that I was doing surgeries on, I could probably help and not done a surgery on. Well, they don't like that if you're not generating revenue, So I can imagine the frustration with these guys who are seeing in their own lives. And I saw one of the comments going, yeah, how do we find a practitioner who won't throw us out of our office if we ask questions or want to just, give me 6 months to try something different before I go on that statin drug, which I don't think anybody should be on, but, just give me the pause, because that's a hard thing. So I think we need to kind of connect with more and more healthcare practitioners in other disciplines, get rid of the ego in healthcare and realize it is for the patient that comes through that door. And that's a hard thing to break down, is to go, I'm not really sure about that, but let's try to find the best person to know that answer, and it definitely always isn't in the individual doctor's office anymore. It could be out there on YouTube or out somewhere else. Probably is most of the time.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, just before we get to Christopher Dixon's question about fasting, Bo has requested a visit from Ted. You will not see Ted because he is fully engaged in his camouflage training. Where's Ted? I don't see it. Can anybody see Ted? Ted, where are you, Ted? Ted, I'm not sure where Ted is. I'll tell you what, though. Perhaps he might have a few words to say. Here's Ted.
Bollocks!
Goodness me, I can't leave him alone for 5 seconds. It's unbelievable. He just can't behave himself. Incredible. Anyway, let's move on to Christopher's question about fasting. Necessary or not necessary?
That's a tough one, I mean, because like with most things, it depends on who who's saying what you should do. I know through my own experience, I think in the beginning of my keto realm, I think I naturally settled into not needing a morning breakfast having something 11 to 12, having a little something maybe by 6, but then I was satisfied. So I kind of fell into a natural, an 8-hour window of eating. I did try, some prolonged fasting just for the self-control thing, just to see how it would feel. And I think I got to a point where, yeah, I felt refreshed and everything. But I think when I really tried to go to one meal a day, really try to do that for me, I think it slowed down any progress that I wanted. And I think it became a distraction. So I think I try to eat when my body tells me to do it. Like, I mean, I don't worry about it. If I nick my face shaving, I don't worry or obsess that I'm going to heal. Well, same thing. My body will tell me when it's time to probably eat. And some days that might be different. Definitely, depending on my physical output, what I might have had before. I know that if I do have a weekend or a day that I've had a really bad decision the next day, I will probably try to maybe not eat for a little bit, just to kind of get things retracked. And when I do, I really go really strict for the next day or next couple of meals, just to kind of get back on track. And that really works for me. But I mean, I've heard you say that, a fast isn't really probably taking you into that physiological benefit unless it's for quite an extended period. If I heard you right in the past,
3 days.
Sometimes and some of these shorter ones, they are marginally beneficial and potentially probably trick the body into something that it's really not wanting to do. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one of my takeaways was from your prior.
Yeah, no, spot on. I think that the benefits of fasting really kick in at around about 72 hours. Prior to that, I don't even really define that as fasting. I just call it not eating at that time. So, yeah, good. Another good question here from Linda. Linda wants to know what we think of organic, high oleic sunflower oil. I have strong opinions on that, but we'll let Christopher air his first.
Multiple things. One, I'm not a fan of it. I'd like to see whoever can oil out a sunflower seed. But secondary, the whole organic movement kind of makes me laugh, because did we hermetically seal, natural strawberry seeds from 250 years ago, and now all of a sudden have organic seeds? So our seeds that we're using to make, plants that don't want to be eaten have been so modified, whether it be intentionally or just through adaptive purposes, that we're not even eating what we were supposed to eat. So I think that whole organic movement is crap, personally. That's just my opinion. And then sunflower oil, we would never have gotten sunflower oil. We may have tried some sunflower seeds when we were desperate, but any oil like that is probably not good for you. And, even if you want to take it down to the basic, the further away it was provided for us by nature, probably the more toxic it is. So I would avoid it at all costs. Go with some butter, fat.
Yep, absolutely.
It'll be okay. I mean, and again, I think just looking at it, and I don't know, it screams inflammatory, and I would think that all the host problems that would be associated with that.
Yep.
Probably not a great choice.
Yep. No, agreed. Not one drop of oil ever should pass your lips.
And that is so hard for patients to find. I mean, I teach my kids right now. We pick up a salad dressing bottle, and my daughter will like, "Oh yeah, Dad, that's man boob food," because it has all these estrogen producing, testosterone blocking oils in it, and they laugh in it, but it is everywhere. It's unbelievable.
Yep. So, I mean, the best way to avoid it is, when you think about it, when you do your shopping at the supermarket, make sure everything that goes in your basket is sourced from the outside wall of the supermarket, basically.
Well, even then, they're getting tricky.
Well, yeah, be careful with that too. Absolutely, yes. But stay right out of all of those rows in the middle, all of that manufactured food like slop. Stay away from all of that stuff. Certainly never buy oil, and don't cook with oil. Don't add oil to anything. Oil is not your friend. Oil is not something.
But I have a question for you. When it comes to animal fat, for example, a cow, there's that whole movement of grass finished or grass, fed and all that. I contend it's probably very hard for a domestic rancher to feed their animals anything but, the organic of grass, right? So do you know, is there validity in the fact that the fat storage on some of these animals will hold more omega-6 or omega-3 fatty acids because of their diet? Is that something you've truly seen in any of the literature, or is that just hearsay from the people who sell
Yeah, it's
these
hard to
things?
say. I mean, there are very slight differences in fatty acid makeup in the fats of, for example, beef fat, for example, depending on whether it's grass-fed or grain-fed, grain-finished, whatever else. The polyunsaturates that are attendant with the saturates found in animal fat in its natural form are not as problematic as it seems that the industrial, refined, manufactured seed oils are, absolutely. Largely because the polyunsaturates that you find, and the monounsaturates as well, that you find in animal fats are all low deuterium, low inflammation, and they're all actually in about the ratios that our bodies expect, because our bodies expect us to eat the fat of ruminants because we've been doing it for 4.5 million years. It's almost as if it's a design of some kind and it works well for us. No issues really, and very, very slight differences between grass-fed and grain-fed animals. Okay, I still think if you had a diet based entirely on grain-fed animals, that's still vastly superior to any diet containing any significant amount of plant material whatsoever. So I don't think you should lose sleep over that aspect whatsoever. So the industrial seed oils that have been refined, extracted, subjected to a chemical shitstorm of bleaching, among other things, heat, high pressure, the stuff that's going to be in the manufacturing process of getting an oil into a bottle, what you will find is almost invariably, if we test those oils, they will be as rancid as hell, which is really severely problematic for human health, hugely problematic. You must never consume oil out of a bottle, ever, is the take home for me.
You know, and I think I shared this with you one of the other times that I had spoken is, you know, over the years, when I do a front and a side view x-ray of somebody of a lower back, and I do that routinely to see what's going on, almost invariably a 50-plus-year-old long distance runner or vegan or vegetarian, I can see their abdominal aorta because it is calcified like a stick of chalk.
Yeah.
Now, for those who you don't know, is when you take a side view x-ray, you see the bones on the film, but x-ray measures, we see density on there. So an abdominal aorta is the major vessel that goes from the bottom of your heart down to your lower extremity. You shouldn't necessarily be able to see that on a normal x-ray. But these long distance runners who are probably over oxidizing themselves with a high carbohydrate diet, or the vegetarians, particularly the women, you can see the outline of that aortic, like you could see my thumb.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, I said, you have a significant problem. Well, how can I heart health, you know, and it's crazy. So when they go, and I always make the recommendation, go see somebody, because God forbid you want to monitor this so it's not a surprise to you. They always then come back to me and say, oh yeah, that's normal. I needed to get on this drug, and this drug. I'm going, well, it's not normal. And no, you don't need that crap. And what do? They tell them to eat more of the thing that got them there.
Yeah.
It's extremely frustrating. So you can see it in people's vascular systems. You can see the consequences of these things. And I was listening to one of the, I don't know if it was on your channel or whatever, but going back to that generational health, you know, orthodontics or teeth are a significant problem in our children now. We've adapted and changed over the last number of years by not eating enough fats, by not eating enough things, or even our denture, our jaws have shortened. So, you know, we have a lot of making up to do as far as getting us back to health as a species.
Yep, you bet.
For sure.
You bet. Okay, Christopher, how are you for time, my friend? We've been going an hour, so.
Whatever you need. I'm enjoying this.
All right, sweet. No, I just wanted to be respectful of your time and check that you're okay for time. I'm perfectly flexible at the moment. So the next question is from Buck. And Buck wants to know about uric acid. Should we take quercetin to reduce uric acid? Again, I've got some ideas on this, but let's hear from Christopher.
Well, I think taking any intervention, whether it be for gout, uric acid, or God forbid, you have a situation, that you need an intervention like that medication to reduce an acute flare up. You know what? I'm glad it's there and you got to do it. Sometimes, heck, you got to even have a morphine shot because I heard that hurts like hell. But the uric acid or the gout that you might be suffering from is not because you have a lack of quercetin in your body. That is only a intervention to eliminate an obstacle of healing at that point. But from my understanding, the uric acid is created from a prolonged diet of rich foods similar to carbohydrate or inflammatory foods, causing your body chemistry to be out of balance. Your body has, what I would call in the chiropractic, reached that limitations of matter. You can do a lot of stupid stuff to your body, but then you hit this threshold and your body's like, I'm done. I can't deal with it anymore. Here's something that will hopefully get you to stop doing what you're doing. So
Screw you guys, I'm going ham. That sort of thing.
I would never tell a patient not to go get that acute problem resolved. But if you stop there and think, well, I'm going to take a maintenance dose of this and still eat the way I did, well, then shame on you. Yeah. Then you deserve your toe to fall off. But take it, intervene, correct yourself, and get your stuff squared up. And then let's, stop chasing a problem. Let's work on solutions. So I could apply that question to probably almost every health condition that you could throw at me. I'm not going to get a best-selling novel by telling people that because it's one chapter.
Yeah.
Don't do something stupid and your body will respond. Treat what you need to do to get the crisis off your back, and then let's try to improve ourselves.
Awesome.
So I know you had
the only thing I would add to that, well, two things. One, don't worry about saying shit. That's fine. That's not a problem on this channel. I've said a lot worse.
I didn't combine it with enough adjectives for you.
No, you need to have cock lunch or fuck monkey or ass hat or something to make it a proper. Yeah, I actually got that idea of doing that. I actually got that from American Pie, the movie. Classic. And what it was a Steve Stiflerism, where what he would do is he would take one curse word and one perfectly innocuous word and double banger those together, and somehow that makes it funny. Like, if I call you a cock, that's probably not remotely as funny as calling you a cock lunch. I don't know. Anyway, that seems to work. People like it. But that's where I got the idea originally. Anyway, what was I talking about? Uric acid, yes. Let's also be cognizant. Let's be aware that uric acid is not bad just because it's there. Obviously, like anything, if its concentration is too high, that's problematic. If it's too low, that's also problematic. There's an ideal range for it, like most things. Uric acid is, in fact, a very useful, very powerful water-based antioxidant, much in the same role as vitamin C used to play in humans before we came down from the trees and banged the rocks together and said, oh, let's do sharp, pointy sticks and stuff. So there's that. Okay. Now, I seem to have lost my next question. The question was around the possibility of gaining enough magnesium on a carnivore diet. Do we get enough magnesium?
Sure, I believe we do. I don't even know what the if we're talking about potentially, bone density, and I don't know, maybe this is parlaying into that type of a question. The worst bone dense people I see are that vegetarian, vegan, post-menopausal female. And this is something I see in my office all the time. I'll have of course, people are concerned that, God, first thing, do no harm, right? So I'm not going to adjust an 80-year-old female the same way where I would adjust a 24-year-old football player. I don't want to turn the poor woman into a bag of lime, right? So I'm much more cautious on that. So we, of course, what's the condition of her spine? You take an x-ray, they may comment that it's osteopenic. Okay, she's 70 years old. She is going to be osteopenic. She's postmenopausal. And then they compare her bone density to a 20-year-old college student. Well, that data is going to support the need for a medical intervention rather than a natural decline in our normal physiology. compounded with an inflammatory lifestyle, blocking, the natural absorption of vitamin D through the gut because of eating too many wheats and grains and all that. So that stuff they never talk about. So of course, when a person comes in, so I probably would assume, and I don't know the data on this, but if you're eating a more naturally appropriate diet, guess what? Your magnesium will probably figure itself out because it's probably a ratio of a balance, like you said, with the uric acid. The body will figure it out and extract from it what it needs, and it doesn't need an outside source. And like vitamin D, I would assume an artificial ground up seashell is not going to give us a bioavailability of anything we want other than our natural means, other than potentially causing other problems. So I think that, not to be flippant out, I'm not exactly sure because that's not my realm, but just stepping back from the principles or the foundation of what we are saying is true, it'll probably work itself out. Now, I know that when I was trying to get fully converted, I did add some electrolytes because I don't think I was using enough salts and getting myself on balance because I was getting cramps and things like that. But that was years ago. So I think through that natural assimilation of the natural products we're eating, then the body will do what it needs to do. And we have to realize, and that goes back to the fact, like you were saying, uric acid is a natural thing. A high blood pressure in a stressful situation is a normal thing. But very often we test it, and you had, I think, said on one of the things is when we measure somebody's cholesterol, that is a snapshot of 1 minute in 1 day, and we don't know how much stress were they under, what did they eat the next, did they, so by basing our entire trajectory of somebody's health over the next 30 years based on one snapshot or an assumption, without getting that whole picture, I think is almost malpractice. I mean, it's out of control. Yeah. When you take a 40-year-old who just had a fight with their kid because they were failing in school and almost got into a car accident, you come in, their blood pressure's up. Okay, well, what's going on? Well, they don't have time to even figure that out. Take this pill, do this, and then we'll see you next time. And then guess what? If it is a natural raised blood pressure because of a stress, de-stress, not eustress, but de-stress or bad stress, guess what's going to happen when you artificially push it down? It's going to go back up. Because the body knows where it wants to be. And it might not be textbook normal, but it's appropriate for that person in that time, unless you step back and see what environmental or physiological factors that we can reduce to get you back into a state of homeostasis or body modulation. So, but you can't sell a product by telling somebody to kind of step back and look at it. Okay, omega-3 is good for you. All right, take fish oil. Oh, we got better. Take krill. My ancestors would never be slurping krill out of the ocean. That's not, you've missed multiple biological steps. We're going to eat the seal that eat the fish that eat the krill. We're not going to go chasing around little fish and never yet krill, but yet you can make an awful lot of money by shilling krill because you manipulated the science to support your argument. And it's no different than allopathy when you get into that realm. Yeah. So that was something about magnesium, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Can't disagree with any of that. The exact wording of the question was, how is it possible to get enough magnesium on a carnivore diet? Which seems to imply that the person asking the question believes, for some reason, that the RDA or RDI, excuse me, it's a judgment on me, the RDA or the RDI is based on science. And that the RDA or RDI, if you like, for magnesium gives us a number of how much magnesium you do in fact need. It doesn't. It doesn't do any such thing. Is it possible to get enough magnesium on a carnivore diet? Well, yes, because I eat a carnivore diet almost 100%. And for the next 90 days, it will be 100%, except for coffee. And I don't get muscle cramps. I don't get palpitations. I don't get restless leg syndrome suddenly because I'm not taking in additional magnesium. I don't use magnesium salts, either topically or in any kind of electrolyte mix that I take in or anything like that. I just eat meat and associated fat, and I drink water, rinse and repeat, basically. So is it possible? Yes. Hello. I'm doing okay. I'm not short on magnesium. If I was, it would show up. It doesn't. So I'm okay. I think the RDA, RDI is a number that's made up just to fool people, really, and it's not based on any experimental science of any kind. Excellent. Very good. All right.
Well, and that was the same thing with the number of calories we need to eat a day.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to process your videos on the definition of calorie, because going through education, going through growing up in our model of health, it's like, man, I got to listen to that again because I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. And it's just fascinating that, and I've had a little bit of science, but I think that might even be more harmful than not having any science, because you have to unlearn and then relearn.
Yeah,
and
exactly that.
Try to logically blend those two. So.
Yeah. The best way to describe the calories argument really in a nutshell is to suggest to you that the calories argument suggests to someone who hasn't thought about it that the greenback dollar and pounds sterling are equivalent. They are the same thing. You can convert one to the other and back again with a middleman who will probably take, or a middle person, I should say, who will take a cut, of course, absolutely, but that's not really why you're called. Basically, it is possible to change the greenback into pound sterling and back again if you want to, but they are not the same thing. You cannot walk into a store in the UK with a greenback dollar and buy something across the counter with that. They will not accept it. Calories are a measurement of energy, specifically by definition and by measurement, in the form of heat. Heat is a number of photons exuding from a certain thing, moving from an area of high energy to an area of lower energy. That's what heat is. Your body cannot encapsulate photons to any meaningful degree and use those to produce energy for metabolic work. Any more than you can go into a store in the UK with a greenback dollar and buy a bottle of Coke. If you were silly enough to want to buy a bottle of Coke for any reason, it won't work. Now you can say, oh yes, but you can go and get your dollars changed into pounds. Absolutely, you can do that. However, if you want to change your heat into effective energy for metabolic process, you can't do that. There is no mechanism, there is no middleman, middle person that can do that job. The only way to measure what heat energy is contained in a food substance is to rapidly combust it in a bomb calorimeter and measure how much the temperature of a water bath around that changes. That's not what your body does with it.
I guarantee you, if 99.9% of the people studying dietetics and nutrition wouldn't even know what you said, and they would have no ability to convey that to anybody, because I don't even know. It's just, but that just shows you that we are conditioned to believe the authority, and it's been taken from us by government, by money, by companies, by industry, and it's taken it away from us as the individual or what's right. I mean, look at the rights that are being taken away from the ability to even how you raise your own family. If you feed your children a healthy diet, you don't do certain medical interventions because you feel that that's not appropriate for them, the government will take away your children. It's insane. And how dare they say that they know what is better for you and your health than you?
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
And while we're at it, I'm an unapologetic libertarian politically, have been my entire adult life for as long as I can remember, as long as I've understood politics at all. So that's the caveat to the statement that's about to follow. And I make no apology for it. Why would I? I genuinely believe it to be the correct approach. And that is this. The government has absolutely no business in my life whatsoever. None at all. The government has several responsibilities and roles which it should fulfill, and it doesn't even do those. So why would it get into other things that it's got no business in if it can't even get the basics right? What are the basics? Protect our country's borders from invading forces or individuals who would come here and do us harm. Okay, they got that wrong. Same thing's happening in the States, I believe, but that's for another day. That's not why you're called either. Number 2, protect my physical person from others who would do me harm. Number 3, protect my property from those that would take it from me, destroy it, or otherwise degrade my life in some way with respect to that. That is all. And that should cost 20 cents on the dollar or less to achieve those 3 goals and do them very, very well. Instead, what we've got in this country, I'll speak about my own country because that's how it is, we have an effective defence force of, get this, less than 2,000 deployable troops. Total. So protecting New Zealand is not going to happen because we've got the might to do it ourselves. No. We need to make deals with others and therefore be behooven to their agenda. That's no good, New Zealand government. Sorry about that. Do they protect my physical person from those that would do me harm? Well, we've seen an example in the last 3 years of them failing completely in that regard too. That's not a topic that's safe to discuss here on YouTube, so we won't. But there we go. And number 3, are they protecting my property against others that would take it from me for ill-gotten purposes or whatever? No, they themselves are taking more than 55 cents out of every dollar I earn to do things like, get this, our Prime Minister recently paid 6 million $6 million New Zealand dollars to one of the largest gangs in the country to use for drug rehabilitation training or whatever. Oh, okay. Good. So anyway, that's not why you called, but I just, it did come up.
No, but I mean, but I think because it's been generational like that, people rely on an authority because I believe that they don't want you to question. They don't want you to question anything, whether it be, like you said, the government, how our money is spent, where our resources go. And if you do, man, they shut you down. I mean, they shut off YouTube, they censor. I mean, half of the things you share on Facebook are sent in with a fact checker's, warning. And who's the fact checker? Just the person paid, as ignorant as anybody. But it doesn't fall into the agenda.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is we're dealing with people's lives and their families' lives, and we're making generations sicker and sicker. And I honestly, at this point in my life, I think it's becoming by design. The sick won't resist. The weak man who eats nothing but soy and becomes a beta with man boobs is not going to fight if the time comes. It's actually disheartening, So I think by sharing the message and empowering the individual to say, I can do something to improve myself, and it's as easy as just choosing what I choose to consume. And you shared, it doesn't have to be a fancy grass-fed only thing. It can be, you know what, get some ground beef and throw away the Twinkie, and you'll make a better decision at that moment. And if you stick with it long enough, you're going to be better. Maybe your kids will see you improve. They'll make the change. Your neighbor will say, oh my God, what have you been doing? Well, let me tell you. And that's how it starts. I think that's how it has to start, because we're not going to see billboards on the freeway saying, eat just meat. We certainly know that that's not true. There's way too much money, lobbying, and power involved in that. And it's pervasive now in these disciplines of health and even academia. I mean, I can't imagine what you went through when you saw the light and, tried to tell your truth. I mean, that must have been a fun time.
Jesus.
And I see it with my own son. He's in college right now, and I don't even know what they're teaching him there when he's, learning to question everything, and I'm giving him resources, and and they're just feeding him this crap. And I told him, I said, well, they're the ones holding the grade book, so you have to learn to discern what the teacher wants to hear back, but yet your truths. So if you know your truth or the truth and their opinion, then you can use a truth at some point when you're well versed in it enough to kind of go back at them. But when you're young and you're passionate, but yet not as well scripted, you lose. And you have to, it's tough. These are hard lessons to learn as an adult or as a young person.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what it is that they want to hear is something like this.
If you don't eat your fruits and vegetables, you might die.
A horrible death.
Ugh.
Horrible.
Yes. And get a vasectomy, baby.
Oh,
Jesus.
yeah. Well, you know what? They're giving it to the men in this country without even having to do a surgery now. I mean, look at soy and what it's in. It's in absolutely everything. I can't imagine what that's doing to the testosterone estrogen balance in these people. And I mean, you can see it. I mean, look at these guys. It's just not a good thing. And they wonder prostate cancer is off the charts. Well, you've been consuming an estrogenic food for the last 30 years. And, you're carrying a cell phone in your front pocket. Good move. Brilliant.
Yeah.
No energy being slammed out of that thing.
No. Yeah. Craziness.
Yeah, science.
Craziness.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's too much money to be made to do the right thing, I think.
Yep. That's it. Well, Christopher, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you to everybody that tuned in for the live stream. Thank you for your participation. Thanks for the questions. We really stuck it to the man today, whoever the man is. For those that missed the early part of the presentation today, Christopher and I have been trying to get it together to do this for several weeks now. We recorded a pre-recorded interview several times, and I had issues with my kit and it failed, and I had issue with external providers of software packages that failed me, and then we tried to have this live stream the other day, and another external provider of service failed, and then their unhelp desk manned by a spotty little Herbert, so we've finally got around to it. We stuck it to the man today, Christopher. We got it done off our own bats with our own software.
I had faith.
Yes.
I had faith.
I'm pleased that we did it. Thank you very much for your valuable time this evening, your time, this afternoon, my time. For those of you in the Commonwealth countries, enjoy the rest of your unplanned holiday, which is occurring today in recognition of the passing of our Queen a few weeks ago. Those of you stateside, go to work and earn some more money so that you can pay it to your government, who will look after your borders, your rights, and your property. Will they? Right. Anyway, that's quite enough of that. Thank you once again. Join us next time, boys and girls, where I'll have another enthralling guest, or someone will be wrong on the interwebs, or both. And in fact, I recorded part 2 of my discussion with himself. It got a bit testy. Mr. Kevin, who is we got onto the topic of cholesterol and LDL, and that it got interesting. So that's in the can, it's recorded, and that will be going up on the channel for your viewing pleasure in the next few days. So Kevin Bass and myself locked horns this morning. It was good fun, and that'll be up on the channel soon. In the meantime, once again, thank you to Christopher Black, Dr. Christopher Black, DC. Where do people find you? How do they get hold of you? Do you have social media? Tell us all about it.
My website for the office is docblack.com, DOCBLACK.com. These conversations have inspired me to do an Instagram and a website, which does link to my regular website, but it's Chiropractic Carnivore. So you might be able to find me on Instagram. I want to kind of grow that just because I love the connection with our community here. And yeah, if you want, let's get this going. And I just love sharing these stories and my opinions. And I learned so much that I bring it back to my office. So this is engaging and exciting for me. So thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you once again for your time. Thank you everyone for being here. Join me next time. Until then, behave yourselves, sit up straight, pay attention. And those of you that were late, stay behind after class for dusters. See ya.